Hello there, friendos, friendettes, and general peoples of the internetscape. This is, of course, your friendly neighborhood Omega, and today I'm going to be bringing you something, again, a little bit different. So, the last video I did that was in the vein of this was for a Wizard's Lizard, and for that video, I basically called it a review. It was more of a first impressions video because while I did kind of encompass every aspect of the game, excepting whatever might happen really later on, it was kind of a review, but instead I thought I would just basically turn this into a first impressions format in the vein of Total Biscuit's WTF is. So don't say I'm copying, because I'm not. I promise I'm not. I'm basically not. I'm just using his format. You wouldn't fault another Let's Player for using another Let's Player's format, because pretty much they all use the same format. So, without further ado, let's start to look at this game. So this is Magicians and Looters. This is a game by Morgopolis Studios, recently released on July 1st. And it was released at $9 total, so let's, I guess I should show you this first. You might notice the very loud music in the background. I'm sorry about that, I can't do much about it. And I'm going to show you why, so let's go ahead and look at this real quick. So you can choose between continue, new game, load game, credits, and quit. Now you might notice something that's, kind of missing from this. That's right, there's no options menu. Now how do you pull up the options menu? Well, there's one of two ways. You can either do it when you enter a new game. I'm just making an Omega thing. There you go, you have your options menu, which I might add, while we're looking at this, is very lacking. So this is your options menu. You have story, which can either be switched to full or abridged. This makes the dialogue either very long or very short. I recommend, actually, I just skip through it. I don't find the writing of this game particularly clever. In fact, I find it a little bit meme-ish and grating, but that's on you. Music, full screen, and frame rate. So, as you'll notice, this actually has no slider, it's just a simple default on or off mode, so I can't actually adjust the volume of the music, so that's a mark against the game. In addition to that, there is no option for the actual sounds of the game. I cannot change those at all. And there's not even a default on-off option, so that's even worse. There's no resolution options at all. You either have full screen on or off, and if it's on, I have absolutely no resolution what it's playing at. It doesn't really say. I would have to assume it's 1920 by 1080 by my monitor, but it's clipping DxTory, so I have to imagine it's not. Frame rate, it just shows the frame rate of the game, which my recording software does anyway, so we don't need to look at that. So, as you can tell, this is a bit of a lacking options menu. Now, you might also notice that I'm moving through this kind of slowly. The reason I have to do that is because this game also does not use the mouse at all. It recommends that you use a pad, and my pad has been disabled for the duration of the actual playtime of this video, so I've had a little bit of a hard time, let's say. You can't use the WASD keys to move. Your only keys are basically the arrow keys, your Z button, your X button, control of all buttons, and spacebar. That's pretty much all you have to work with, and I'll show you those as we get into it. So, we're just going to escape this. I already have a pre-existing file. I should also mention, if you hit continue, you get right into the game and you have absolutely no way to access the options menu, so you have to quit out if you actually want to edit some of the options, and you have to go to load game, which will require you to load a new game. And in that process, the game actually says 57 minutes, I've been playing for longer than that. You can then edit the options, what little there are. You can luckily rebind the keys if you're having problems with that, so I should probably do that at some point, but anyway, I didn't actually know that you could rebind the keys, the game never explicitly says. So, let's go ahead and get back into my game. So you have, as you find out in the beginning of the game, you have 3 different playable characters. You have Nin, Vienna, and I believe his name is, yes, Brent. These characters play a little bit differently. Your X key is your block key or your dash key. In the case of Nin, it is your roll key. In the case of Vienna, it's kind of a weird phase dash thing, but it always moves away in the opposite direction of the way you're facing, so this kind of gets problematic. So let's go with Nin here. Nin obviously has this slide maneuver that you unlock fairly early on in the game, and of course you can jump with the spacebar, move around with the arrow keys, you can look up, down, left, right, and this is actually the crouching position. Sufficiently old school because you can actually get down kind of in a kneeling position and space to drop through platforms, as I'll show you. Control is innately bound to your attack, and you have the option of weapons that you can pick up. I only have 2 presently, and a bunch of different items that you can use. These are basically little trinkets that you can put on your character. All of these little trinkets have different effects. Currently I'm using the loot magnet simply because I wanted more money. The money that you see up top can basically be used at shops to buy either items or new moves. And the little orb that you see up there in the corner is my experience, so... That is also another system I'm going to have to point out. So these little creatures I'm fighting are just little creatures, so... As you might notice, there is not a lot of enemy variety, and it is kind of hard to avoid attacks. There's only about 4 different types of enemies that I've encountered thus far. So, what you might have noticed right now is that I've activated Blitz. This is another feature you get fairly early on in the game. I don't really know how to activate it, but it seems to be when you do the crouching attack move, it seems to signal for Blitz to basically kick in. Blitz improves your movement speed, your attack speed, and I think it improves your health regeneration for a short duration of time. You move between screens, of course, as the gameplay works. It's very Castlevania in that regard, and if you go back to a screen, as you'll see, all the enemies respawn. So, yeah, very Castlevania. And of course, you can pick up them for loot again. So while I'm on it, I should probably explain the level up mechanic. It's pretty odd the way that it works. So, instead of the normal level up system where you might find in normal RPGs, where you would have to, say, kill a set number of enemies or complete challenges or anything of that nature, in Magicians and Looters you actually find these little level up orbs, I guess is the best way to call them, and you have to collect a certain number of these in order to level up. Once you collect a certain number, you will level up, and you'll either gain some kind of passive benefit or you gain a new ability. And now the Blitz meter is full. As you can see, this is a destroyed chest. You can often find chests around that you can destroy for certain pieces of loot or the upgrade coins. And other than that, your basic method of getting items is to buy them from the shop. And the shops are very, very sparse, so good luck ever finding them. I found 2 shops in my total time of playing. These enemies are very reminiscent of the Medusa heads from Castlevania. So what you might notice is the soundtrack is pretty decent. It's a little bit repetitive, and it'll basically be the same tune playing throughout these caves. But again, because I can't sodding change the volume of it, it's a little bit of a problem. Now comes another part that you might notice. So, the artwork of this game is a little bit creepy at times. The merchant is a pretty good example of this. Every merchant looks like that. And he is, boy is he happy. So I got a new weapon, so let's go ahead and equip that. And I tried to use the mouse, and I just remembered, can't use the mouse. So you can pick up different weapons. Only Brent and Nin can use weapons. Vienna is reserved to using her fists because she is a dumb sod like that. She loves using her fists. She doesn't think of anything else. As you'll notice, I'm not really dodging away from these guys because it's a little bit hard. As it's bound to the X key, it's kind of hard to basically press Control and X at an opportune time. And yeah, it's a little bit annoying. So it's kind of hard to focus and do this at the same time. And once you have to remember that Control is not your crouch key and you have to press down to do it, it's kind of hard to conserve health. And in order to really conserve health, you have to kind of... Yeah, the portraits are a little bit awkward. In order to really conserve health, you kind of have to just go back to camp, or you have to pick up food that you'll find in the environment. These rocks are the creepiest thing, and I keep seeing them. So you have reasonably varied environments. Thus far, I've been to a forest level, a swamp level, and those underground caves that you were seeing again. Also, Vienna. She can kick. Yeah, dim kicks though. Vienna also has a special jumping maneuver, very similar to the slide maneuver that Nin has. At camp, you can change between your characters, but generally, kind of want to roll with Nin. I'm skipping through this dialogue because it's not very relevant. I don't really know who the character artist was on this, but it's safe to say that these portraits, if you will, are not of the greatest fidelity ever. Also, you'll notice I'm skipping through most of these enemies. Now, why am I doing that? Most of the time you'd want to kill enemies, wouldn't you? Well, the problem is that there's not a lot of incentive in this game. Of the many games I've played that are... Of the many RPGs I've played that are in this sort of style, 2D scrolling RPGs, this game has very little to compel you to play it. And how's the best way to phrase that? The story of the game is that basically you are the apprentices of some great wizard, I believe his name is Verismos, or Verismos, something to that effect. And I hate the music of this, I'm just gonna ignore it. This music. He is captured by some evil dark villain who is very uncleverly hinted is the great evil villain, blah blah blah. I've been to that room. And yeah, that's about it. That's what gets you started on the plot. It's not really that thick of a plot. You basically get teleported out of Castle Looter, and are sent to this kind of cave area where you have to play through the 3 characters, figure out what happened to them that got them to this point, and then at this point you're basically headed toward the labyrinth, which, if I might show you, you also can't just bring up the map through a key. You have to actually hit escape and then find your way to a map. Now the problem here is that, look at that map. Do you see anything of use on this map? Because I don't. The problem with the map is that the map doesn't very accurately display anything about where you are or where you're supposed to be going. So most of the time you're left wondering what you're supposed to be doing or what path you're supposed to be on, and you're left just wandering down different pathways until you find the optimal location to go down. Now this is a new enemy, I've never faced him before. This might be an opportune time to show you something. So, if you hold down Z and control, which is really awkward control, you can actually fire little fireballs, not rockets. And this is actually a good time to show you the continue screen. So if you actually die in an area, you'll be restarted at the camp that you last visited, which is sufficiently old school, but it is really annoying. If for no other reason than you have to skip through all that dialogue if you don't want to read it, and most of the time you won't because the dialogue really isn't that interesting or special. It doesn't tell you much about the characters, and most of the characters spend their time whining in the cutscenes, so... Now this guy we kind of have to kill because the game demands it, for some reason. As I was saying, if you hold Z and control, which is a really, really awkward control scheme, you can actually fire little fireballs, which you also earn fairly early on in the game. And if you just simply hold Z, you can actually recharge your magic a little bit faster than you otherwise would, but you have to hold still while you're doing it. The magic regens, or I guess mana, regens over time, gradually. You don't actually have to get a potion for it or anything. And to the best of my knowledge, there are no items that you can pick up that will actually make it replenish faster. I mean that in terms of like little pickups like the food replenishes your health. There's nothing that replenishes your mana, really. So that isn't really a concern. And if any of you Castlevania fans think that you can actually hit these torches and get stuff out of them, you can't, which is highly disappointing. So yeah, as you can see, I'm at the area I just was. It's very confusing, and the map really doesn't help you at all. The map doesn't tell you anything about your relative location. See, I'm back here. The map doesn't tell you anything about your relative location that's helpful to you. And for the most part, you're just going to be wandering around anyway because there's absolutely no idea to know where you're supposed to be going. At least for the most part. At least this enemy's a little bit more challenging. So yeah, for the most part, I spend my time in this game not knowing what I'm doing. I'm basically running around and kicking things like this. Look, I can kick you. The other part is the hitboxes. I've just noticed this. The hitboxes are really weird. Because if you'll notice, like right here, actually a little bit closer, it looks like I should be kicking him, but I'm not quite within range. And as it would appear, we both died. But hopefully that gate will continue just going on up. Also a problem, the noises seem to persist. Now, what's something else I should talk about? I should probably talk about the effects of the game in terms of the sound effects. Some are decent, but a lot of them seem to be very middling. If I could find a gate, I would just love to let you hear the sound of it, because the gates basically make this one starting gate sound that never, ever seems to move through the full gate noise. It's just this one noise repeated over and over again, and hopefully I'll show it to you. So this is a new area. These zip lines are fairly fun to ride. They usually lead you over gaps or to different areas. Oh, and a camp. Sweet. Now, the backgrounds of this game aren't that bad, but what's actually in the foreground is not exactly that high fidelity, to put it this way. It's very pixely, it's not very well textured, the animation isn't great, it's fairly repetitive, and it doesn't seem to flow very seamlessly. it kind of feels a little bit janky. It might not be that obvious in the video, but it certainly feels that way. Okay, this background is not very creative. Some of these backgrounds look nice, some don't. A lot of the objects, as you can see with these pillar things in the foreground, are very, very low res. They don't look good at all. Alright. What else is odd about this game is that in a lot of the ways that the platforming works, and in a lot of ways that you have to move through these environments, it almost feels like a Mario game. Like, you'll notice in the way that you jump, in the way that you kill enemies, in the way that everything works, it really does feel like a Mario game. It's very odd in that way, but I suppose what makes it a little bit different is the fact that you have the addition of weapons. The weapons make it a little bit more interesting, but when you're just rolling with Vienna here, you have no weapons, and as I can show you, you don't have the option to switch from her arms, it's just her arms. Which I guess is their way of saying that's how you can't have her have a weapon, because you'd be replacing her arms with weapons, which personally I would find very interesting, but I'm not these devs. So it seems I'm going to need Nin to go through that area, but we might as well travel further down and see what we can find. Now sometimes the soundtrack isn't that bad, sometimes it's a little bit monotonous, but like right here, it's actually pretty good. Oh. And then stuff like that happens, where you fall in lava, and you die. Horribly. Yes, I'll continue. Alright, let's actually switch out to Nin so we can see if we can get through that area. So is the game any good? Well, it kinda depends on perspective in this case, so we actually need Vienna for that. The game is alright, but in terms of 2D side-scrolling, pixelated RPGs, when you have options like Shovel Knight, I would say that there are a lot better options out there for what you could get. And as you notice there, the great noise is basically just the same repetitive noise over and over again. Alright, so that fireball's gonna track all the way over there, so we're just gonna try and run our way over here. No! No! Oh, so close. Alright, so let's try that one more time. The problem is the asking price is $10. If this game was like, well, let's say $4, maybe $5, maybe even $3, I would have a much easier time I'd have a much easier time recommending it, but as it stands with the current price point, this game is really hard to recommend when there are such better options out there. I mean, and it's $9 currently on sale, you have to consider. It's eventually going to get off that sale, and it's going to become a problem when it does. I don't honestly know if you guys would want to purchase this game, and that's from a personal standing. Also, I suck. The other problem you face is that when you're trying to just roll through, or rather slide through one of those little holes, which Nin has the ability to do, most of the time you end up just rolling into it, and in times like that where it's actually timed, it's really annoying and really janky. But how do I put this? The game doesn't make me mad. The game doesn't ever feel like I'm mad at it. It's hard to explain. The game doesn't feel terrible. I guess that's the best way to explain it. It doesn't look great. It doesn't feel great. But it's not exactly terrible. And I guess that's a selling point, but the problem is that I can't just recommend something that's just not terrible. That's not enough to go on. See? Sod. So, it's kind of going to be up to you at this point. If this looks like the kind of game you'd be interested in, then I'd say... No, even for $9, I'd say buy something like Shovel Knight, because this game is just... I don't think it's worth $10, and that's from a personal standpoint. Between the lackluster art, the lackluster pistol art, the somewhat repetitive soundtrack, the fairly weird control scheme, the absolutely horrendous menu options, which are... I'm saying menu options with the most salt being spilled as I can, not even a grain. I really don't think this is a polished product worthy of $10. If it goes down a good deal, maybe, because this seems like the kind of game that you could get a good many hours out of if you kind of enjoy this game. And it might even be better on a pad, I can't really speak to it. But currently, in the state that I found it, it's just not that good. I really don't think so. I don't think it's $10 worth. But before we close out here, let's go ahead and grab Brent. We haven't grabbed him yet. The platforming isn't janky. The controls are janky, sure, but it's just a very odd game. Because I haven't not enjoyed my time with it, I'm just not that happy with it. I think it could be so much more, and it's disappointing. I think there is a good deal of promise in this game because there could have been a lot of interesting mechanics that they could have rolled with, and it just ends up feeling like a generic, boring, samey, Metroidvania-style RPG. That sound effects, though. And as a result, I just think it feels kind of lazy. Also, it has traps like that. So it's up to you guys. Magicians and Looters, available on Steam for $9 or your regional equivalent, depending on what that is. My name has been Omega. I'll see you next time.